Congressional lawmakers on Sunday agreed to a deal to avert a looming government shutdown, advancing a 3-month stopgap spending agreement with emergency funding for the Secret Service and without the harsh voter registration restrictions demanded by former President Donald Trump. And several senior members have resigned from Republican Mark Robinson's campaign for North Carolina governor as old posts he allegedly wrote on a porn site upended his campaign and threatened the GOP's prospect in a key battleground state. And the former president, who has shifted his position over the years on LGBTQ issues, is planning to lead the GOP charge on gender identity if he returns to the White House. He says he wants to kick providers out of Medicare and Medicaid for offering gender transition care to minors, such as hormone therapy and surgery. And a Nebraska Republican state lawmaker said today that he remains opposed to switching how the state allocates its electoral votes, effectively blocking a bid by President Trump and his allies to change the system in a bid for an extra electoral vote this fall. And crime, including serious violent incidents like murder and rape, dropped nationally from 2022 to 2023. Violent crime was down about 3%, and property crime took a similar drop of 2.4%. This is all according to an FBI report. And echoing well-trotted disinformation that has infected the U.S. presidential election, pop icon Janet Jackson says she has heard that Vice President Kamala Harris is not Black. And the arrest of Sean Combs last week on charges including sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy represents a stunning reversal of fortune for the hip hop mogul, who as recently as last year was feted as an industry visionary before a sudden series of sexual assault accusations were filed against him. And today was the deadliest day of Israeli attacks in Lebanon. Now, this is the deadliest day since at least 2006. More than 1,000 people were injured as a result of the attacks. This is the rising tensions that are occurring between Israel and Hezbollah, the Iranian-backed militant and political group that controls much of Lebanon. Now, this tension appears to be escalating even as the United Nations is convening its annual Assembly of World Leaders this week. The uptick in fighting highlights the long and bitter history between Israel and regional foes and the UN's inability to resolve it, despite numerous efforts over decades. This is Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. This is your one-stop destination for today's trending news, expert analysis, and my unfiltered opinions. This is hour 2 of Areva Martin in real time, and this is the hour where we go a little deeper, where we dig behind those headlines and bring you the stories that people are talking about. Well, since last week, when Sean Diddy Combs was actually turned himself in a New York court house for charges of conspiracy and racketeering. That has been one of the biggest conversations happening online. These charges, including transportation to engage in prostitution, came after months of lawsuits and several allegations of sexual assault, gender violence, and misconduct. According to the victims, these acts of misconduct and illegal activity took place over years. After Sean Diddy Combs pled guilty in a courtroom last Tuesday, his attorneys set out on a mission to get him released on a really high bail amount pending his actual trial in New York. They put together a bail package that would have included a $50 million bail that would be backed by a mansion that Sean Combs owns in Miami. His mother was also going to be a guarantor on this bail amount. 3 of his adult sons were also involved, and even the mother of one of his children. This is a package put together by his attorney to say to the court, look, we've taken his passport. The passports of his relatives, some of his close relatives, have been surrendered. We can secure this bail amount. And then they went even further and says we can give 24-hour security, private security to this home to ensure that he doesn't leave, Sean Combs doesn't leave except for medical appointments and court appearances. Obviously, Sean Combs and his lawyers thought that this would be a persuasive argument to the trial court. It wasn't. The court denied him bail, and he then filed an appeal of the lower courts or the trial court's decision. And the appellate court also denied him bail, citing that they believed that he was a flight risk and a danger to the community. There are allegations that Sean Combs made about 58 attempts to contact some of the potential witnesses and victims in this case. And according to some reports, he has a history of contacting victims and witnesses that concern the courts and caused the court, both the trial court and the appellate court, to deny him bail on these very serious charges. So as of today, he will remain in detention, awaiting very serious trial on these very serious issues. Now, his lawyers have taken to the airways. They've been on several news programs saying that he's innocent, that he vehemently denies all of the allegations made against him, saying that the freak-offs, these are the sex parties that are described and detailed in the indictment, they said they involve consensual sex between adults. In fact, Sean Combs' lawyer said on a program last week that he interviewed 6 of the male prostitutes involved in these sex parties, and that they all said to him that they were not coerced, that they were doing their jobs as sex workers. They were paid, they were understood the assignment, and they were there, on their own volition, their own will, that they were not being forced, and that they did not participate in sex with anyone that they believed was not a consenting adult. So you have 2 very different pictures of what was happening at Sean Combs's various homes and in these hotel rooms. According to the indictment, these hotel rooms were used for these sex parties, and that there would be damage. The rooms would be severely damaged. Thousands of dollars would have to be paid to restore the rooms. The indictment, it's just full of salacious details about Sean Combs's sex life and this enterprise of sexual activity, illegal activity that the U.S. attorney says involves kidnapping, arson, and more serious crimes. So I have my 2 legal experts here, Bobby Grace and Mansfield Collins, are joining me. They know a lot about these kinds of cases, these kinds of indictments, particularly when they're RICO charges and conspiracy charges like they are in Sean Combs's case. So I wanted to get their take on this, help me and our audience understand how come more people were not identified in this indictment, since this is a conspiracy, and conspiracies involve multiple people. So when we come forward, going to pick the brains of 2 of the best lawyers in the business. Bobby Grace and Mansfield Collins join me. Stay with us. KBLA Talk 1580.
You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580. Tabitha Smiley's new book, The Covenant with Black America, 20 years later, is now on sale everywhere. This classic text shot to #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list almost 2 decades ago. If you have the original book, you will surely want to get this 20th anniversary edition with powerful new contributions from today's leading voices. This 20th anniversary edition presents a compelling blend of historical insights and contemporary urgency in this critical and unprecedented election year. Get your copy of The Covenant with Black America, 20 years later today.
Febreze Fabric Talk. Hey, it's me, your couch. Today's my favorite day of the week. Febreze Fabric Spray Day. The occasional deep cleans are nice, but in between, I'm needing a refresh. Ooh, here she comes with the Febreze Fabric Spray. Oh yeah, spritz them armrests. Don't be shy. Nothing like a good spray down to get me smelling so fresh and clean. Don't forget my back. Nice. Febreze Fabric Spray. It's just that easy. Now we can both breathe happy. Febreze. La 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 la.
We're with Bridget, whose husband won't be home for months, and whose daughter is due any day. We're with Mike, who's leaving home to protect his family and yours. We're with all service members and their families who need community, connection, and maybe a bit of magic. Are you with them? Learn more at uso.org today.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA reminds you that when we fight, we win, and we don't black down. LA Community Action Network, or LA CAN, was formed in 1999 when 25 residents of downtown LA came together and acknowledged the problems that existed in their community and made a commitment to do something about those problems, to stand together, organize, and become a force in the community that demands change. Civil rights and preventing the criminalization of poverty are their core projects. In addition, they take on women's rights, the human right to housing, and healthy food access. LA CAN also has projects focused on economic development, civic participation, voter engagement, and community media. While downtown LA remains their home base, with a particular emphasis on the Skid Row community, in 2007, they expanded their housing and healthy food access work into South Central Los Angeles. LA CAN believes that power for low-income people and people of color is achieved through a large, active, and well-informed member base that utilizes a multitude of methods to advance their messages and goals. If you'd like to join the Los Angeles Community Action Network and organize people to fight back against oppression, please visit cangress.org. That's cangress.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
We are back. And last week, Tuesday, the indictment against Sean Combs was unsealed. And of course, we learned the most salacious details in that indictment. And those details include descriptions of drug-fueled sex parties and other activities allegedly hosted by Combs on his property. The indictment alleged that Combs would force women into lengthy sexual sessions with male sex workers while he recorded the encounters to be used as blackmail against victims to keep them from coming forward, and pleasured himself. He called these sessions freak-offs. Freak-offs were elaborate and produced sex performances that Combs arranged, directed, masturbated during, and often electronically recorded. Now, this is according to the indictment. Per this document, the rapper lured women into his home with promises of a romantic relationship, then piled them with drugs to facilitate the freak-offs. One particularly telling details that the sessions lasted so long that the women involved had to receive fluids through an IV afterward to recover from the physical exertion and drug use. Woo, Bobby Grace and Mansfield Collins are here. Bobby, you are a veteran prosecutor. You've been involved in cases where there have been lengthy indictments that have been issued with salacious details. Have you ever seen an indictment with details about women being forced to have sex for so long that they have to go and have an IV insertion to recover?
Good evening, Areva. No, this indictment was rather shocking. I was taken aback by the fact that the U.S. attorney took the opportunity to read the entire indictment. And the indictment contains just about every allegation that they contend that P. Diddy or Diddy was involved in. And the charges are very serious. As you know, he's facing the possibility of life in prison. But more than that, they go into great detail about how these activities were perpetrated, the extent, as you pointed out, how long they lasted, in great detail about everything that was done. And that's unusual for a federal indictment. They didn't leave anything to the imagination. They laid it all out there, and the information, if true, is pretty damning. And I can see why he went out and got himself some really good lawyers.
Yeah, Mansfield, the unsealed indictment revealed that Combs was charged with sex trafficking and racketeering. These are the same crimes R. Kelly was found guilty of in 2022. Uh, Help us understand how we get to racketeering. We know that's a charge usually against mobsters, gangsters who are involved in, illegal drug activities, illegal, sex trade. But in this case, you have what the U.S. attorney called the Combs enterprise. But there weren't other defendants named. So typically, you have a conspiracy, you have enterprise that involves other people. What do you make of the fact that Sean Combs is the only individual identified in this indictment, given the charges?
I would be, hello, Areva and Bobby. I'm disappointed when I read the indictment. In actuality, this is the kind of indictment that a rule for a Rule 12b-6 motion for dismissal will probably be filed very soon, and that encompasses something like a demur. Because when you read the indictment, it has generalizations of activities, and you wonder, are they talking about just nasty activities? Are they talking about orgies? Or are they blending orgies with crimes? And I think that because they aren't specific, either the government intends to file a superseding indictment with many more facts later on, or the presumption of innocence is still something that's a constitutional right that all of us have. And as a criminal defense attorney, I would say the government has a hard case to prove against Mr. Combs. It carries the breath of saying that his Bad Boy Records, his recording studio, his alcoholic spirits label, his media empire, that constitutes a criminal enterprise. And what's devastating is that if the government proves that, they also have a forfeiture allegation. They are going to put Mr. Combs out of business if, in fact, they prove these allegations. So aside from the fact that you can be sentenced to incarceration, the actual impact of this case could actually close down all of his businesses.
Well, let me ask you if you agree with that, Bobby, because Mansfield just said the indictment is vague, doesn't give details. But when I read the indictment, it talks very explicitly about coercing women, forcing women, using intimidation and other tactics to force women to engage in this conduct. So, do you agree with what Mansfield is saying about the indictment being subject to a motion to dismiss and maybe perhaps, the defense gets it thrown out?
Unmute.
Yes and no. Mansfield is getting at the point that they in the indictment don't specifically say, P. Diddy was involved in rape. They don't say that he was involved in extortion. They don't say that he was involved in another litany of crimes. They kind of creep right up to it. So Mansfield is correct in that. But Areva, you're also correct in pointing out that they're alleging an overarching conspiracy to do all of these different things under the rubric of racketeering, which is very different for these types of crimes. You usually do not see, especially the federal government, come in and try to prove that somebody's legitimate business, because we can all agree that his business has been legitimate for many years, that, oh no, hold up, his business is actually a front for all of these other sexually related offenses. Now, the main thing that he is charged or going to be indicted or is indicted for is sex trafficking and transportation for sex. And those are the things that he really has to worry about because they carry significant time. We know from the civil case that was filed after his girlfriend that there's another individual who apparently is one of the individuals that were paid to have sex, that traveled to have sex, and that he's alleging a lot of the allegations that you see in the government's indictment. So again, I would argue that Mr. Combs is in serious legal trouble. And I do agree with Mansfield that there are more possibly individuals that are going to be brought into this. and that possibly there are unindicted co-conspirators who have made deals with the government, which we've talked about on other cases, that may be the shoe that's going to drop later.
But let me ask you this, Mansfield. Why do we need other people? We saw the Cassie Ventura video. We didn't see him do anything to her sexually, but we did see him physically abuse her. We know that she claims that she was trying to leave one of those freak off sex parties. And we know that she's alleged in her civil suit the kind of coercion, the kind of intimidation that he used to get her to engage in that conduct, that he forced her to have sex with sex workers against her will. So even if you just have Cassie, and we know he has no credibility on anything he says about Cassie because we got the videotape where he's dragging her down the hall and beating the crap out of her. If we just have Cassie Ventura get on the witness stand and say that he did these things to her, he forced her to have sex, he transported her across state line and forced her to have sex with male prostitutes against her will, that seems like that's all the government would need to get him convicted on sex trafficking. You don't have to sex traffic multiple people.
She would be a witness, but she is not listed as a victim in the indictment.
Does she have to be? But does she have to be?
No, she would be a witness. She could testify about something that happened to her. And a criminal defense attorney would cross-examine her, and she would. There's going to be many motions in this case to exclude evidence that is deemed to be highly prejudicial. And if you look at that video of
I know, but wait a minute, Mansfield, you're jumping down to the trial. I'm just trying to understand if the government has Cassie as one of the witnesses that came forward to say, this happened to me. I was forced into sex trafficking. I was forced to have sex with men that I did not want to, as he photographed me, as he took these videos, as he masturbated. Is that enough for a conviction let's start with the indictment, for an indictment on sex trafficking?
It may be enough for a indictment under, I'm not sure it would be enough for the indictment under racketeering. It may be enough for an indictment for proof of a crime under sex trafficking. But I think that's going to be a hard case to follow because they were in a relationship that then apparently went south. I'm not too sure.
Wait a minute, Mansfield. The women that R. Kelly was in relationships. That's the whole premise of these cases, is that you are lured into what you believe to be a romantic relationship, and the person then uses their power over you to force you to do things that you wouldn't ordinarily do. I think that is the crux of the case. Yes, I thought he loved me, but yet he used me. He trafficked me to strange men. He took advantage of me in my most vulnerable state because I thought this was a relationship.
But Areva,
you could be right, Areva, but we haven't seen that case being made on Cassie's behalf yet. So we have to wait and see that case being made if she testifies as a witness to her own abuse. And if she was present during some of these orgies, then she would be a witness, a firsthand witness to testify about these orgies. Yes.
Yeah, Areva, the indictment reads as if they're going to present some of these male sex workers as the individuals who are the crux of that. Remember that Cassie filed a very public lawsuit, and one day before the statute of limitations ran, and then Diddy settled with her out of court. I'm sure that a non-disclosure agreement was entered into. I don't think that she's going to be a voluntary witness.
Non-disclosures mean nothing once you get hit on the shoulder by the feds. You know that those non-disclosure agreements have a caveat.
I know, but I don't think that she's going to be necessarily a voluntary witness in this.
I totally disagree. You guys, Cassie is the one they said that went to the feds to make her complain that she was filing her civil complaint. I think she's their star witness.
I'm not sure about that. I would wait to see if she ends up being the actual star witness. Definitely, you're right that what happened to her is kind of the crux that brought everything together. But I do think that there are other individuals who are not named in this that are going to be that the government has already obtained their testimony for and are going to be.
Well, obviously, that the government has talked to. Obviously, they have a case. Let's be clear. They talked to some people. They didn't just take the civil lawsuits and decide let's file a criminal indictment. There was a grand jury convened, and obviously witnesses had to present at those grand juries proceedings. And whatever non-disclosure agreement she may have filed in a civil case will have no bearings in a criminal case if she is subpoenaed by the federal government to give testimony about a crime. So folks who think they can protect themselves from criminal liability by settling in a civil suit and getting a non-disclosure, that's not a shield of liability. So let's be real clear about that. And anybody out there that thinks that, you're sadly mistaken, because if you get a subpoena from any criminal, for any criminal case, any body, district attorney, U.S. attorney, you've got to testify, and they could care less about your little NDA. When we come forward, I want to talk about this creative bail package that was denied at the trial court level and then at the appellate level involving Sean Diddy Combs. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580.
More of Areva Martin in real time when we come forward.
I'm Amber Payton. Here's the latest on the Black Information Network. A new report finds widespread failure within NYPD leadership to discipline officers who engage in unlawful stop and frisk tactics. The report by a retired state judge says police commissioners have regularly scaled down the punishment of cops found to have unconstitutionally stopped, frisked, and interrogated people on the street, including those who have a pattern of doing so. The study, the most thorough of its kind since 2013, was ordered by a federal judge into such misconduct during stops, which has been shown to disproportionately target Black and Latino residents. It finds that between June 2021 and March 2022, only 10 out of 61 alleged stop and frisk cases were resolved with penalizing officers. The trial of a man charged with killing a Black Memphis rapper is underway. Justin Johnson is one of two men charged with the murder of Young Dolph in November 2021. Police say two men got out of a stolen car and fired shots into the cookie store while the rapper was shopping. That's the latest. I'm Amber Payton on your home for 24/7 News, the Black Information Network.
Continue to be advised that an accident blocks two right lanes of Boyle Heights 10 East before the 5-101 split, with stop traffic almost close to 2 hours from Centinela Avenue. In West LA on the 405 North at the 10, watch for an accident on the right shoulder and heavy traffic coming from Venice Boulevard. There's a backup from Highway 57 in San Dimas on the 210 East at Foothill Boulevard as an accident remains on the right shoulder. Also, a 30-minute delay and backup is coming from Inglewood as a car fire is on the on-ramp for the 405 South from Manchester Boulevard, La Cienega interchange. And right now, that 30-minute backup is riding heavy from Santa Monica Boulevard.
This National Recovery Month, start your recovery journey. Explore and choose a proven addiction treatment option that's right for you at choosechangeca.org. Recovery starts today.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
A little more info on Rams backup wide receiver Xavier Smith, the undrafted rookie from HBCU Florida A&M. Smith was one of the stars in Sunday's win over the 49ers. When Smith had the crucial 37-yard punt return with a minute left, it was the first time he touched the ball in an NFL regular season game. Smith was on the Rams practice squad until Saturday. He was promoted for Sunday's game because of the Rams' injury issues at wide receiver. With the game tied at 24 and the Rams needing field position, Rams coach Sean McVay made a surprise decision to send out Smith to return the 49ers punt. Smith's return set up the Rams' game-winning field goal with 2 seconds left. Smith is one of 3 Florida A&M players on an active NFL roster. Isaiah Land is a defensive end with the Indianapolis Colts, and Marquise Bell is a defensive back with the Dallas Cowboys. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Yeah, y'all, come on. Pick up the drum.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we fight the power every day.
Yeah, gotta give us what we want. Gotta give us what we need. Hey.
I listen to KBLA and I love the commercials. I know what the commercials mean. I also, if I'm looking and trying to figure something out, I need something to talk to me that might hit me. And it happens on TV because, every time they show a sporting event, they got the pharmaceutical companies back to back telling people how to fix the sickness on the same stuff that they sell them. So we get it.
Yep, we get it too, Chuck D. And that's why at KBLA Talk 1580, we don't black down.
Drop it. Our freedom of speech is freedom of step. We got to fight the powers that be. Fight the power. Fight the power.
Climate justice, climate equity, climate resilience. By any other name, we demand environmental justice in 2024 and beyond. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we don't black down.
Have you heard of the 50-30-20 rule? This can help you spend and save your money wisely. So how does it work? Distribute your dollars into 3 buckets. 50% towards needs, 30% towards your wants, and 20% goes to savings. Use this tool to help your journey to financial success. Sponsored by JP Morgan Chase & Company. If you have asthma, you know that there are certain things that can set off your asthma symptoms. These things are called triggers, and patients with severe asthma have an average of 8 triggers. It could be pollen, dust, pollution, colds, viruses, smoke, or stress. If you know your symptoms, you have already taken the first step to managing your asthma. The next step is to write your triggers down in a notebook or journal and record your symptoms when you come across those triggers. This will give your healthcare provider valuable information about what you can do to help manage your triggers. By understanding your triggers and writing them down, you are on your way to taking back control of your lung health. Visit luma-edu.com for more guidance. This message is brought to you by Amgen and AstraZeneca.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
We are back, and we're talking about the indictment against Sean Combs. It was unsealed last Tuesday in a courtroom in New York, and the indictment describes Combs as the head of a criminal enterprise that engaged or attempted to engage in activities including sex trafficking, forced labor, interstate transportation for purposes of prostitution, drug offenses, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice. Help us out, Bobby.
Yes. Reva, you are pointing out that these particular charges are very, very serious. Involves transporting individuals, sex workers for the purposes of sex. And Mansfield, as you were pointing out earlier, you said that the statute of limitations would have run for simple assault, rape, some of these other charges that he could have faced, let's say in California, where the 2016 incident occurred. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes. Because when the government, the assistant U.S. attorney for New York, gave his press conference, when he gave his press conference and read the indictment word for word, in the background, he showed the sad, vicious attack on Cassie, on Cassie. And I think that he gave the impression that the indictment was about Cassie. But what it also did, it really inflamed and distracted people from what was actually in the indictment to now focus again on that shocking, brutal beating that Mr. Combs gave to Cassie. No one can justify that. He should have been charged with a crime at the time, and he should have been sentenced for it.
Well,
the statute of limitations that happened in California, though, and that if he had been charged in California, he would have had to have been charged sometime between 2016 and 2021. I believe that's when the statute of limitations would have run on assault and battery in California.
So you're right about that, Mansfield, but this charge under this indictment is broader, racketeering.
Yes.
And he's accused of, in the indictment, striking, punching, and dragging women on numerous occasions, throwing objects and kicking them, and enlisting his personal assistant, security, and household staff to help him hide it all. Oh, how come, Bobby, none of that security staff or personal assistants or household staff that are alluded to in the indictment or mentioned, I shouldn't say alluded to, they're actually mentioned, but not by name. How come they weren't indicted? Aren't they a part of the conspiracy?
They are what we call unindicted co-conspirators. So what I suspect, and maybe Mansfield will agree with me on this, I think that the government has spoken to a number of different people. Some of those people have filed civil suits that didn't get as far as Cassie's suit has gone. Some of those people have made statements to the press. So it's pretty clear that there are other individuals out there who are claiming that they were also duped, sexually assaulted, hit with things as you just described, Areva, and that they are maybe able to name other individuals who worked for Mr. Combs, individuals that were part of his staff, et cetera, et cetera. Those people may have also given testimony to the government and are unindicted co-conspirators who will later turn out to be charged, but will be government witnesses against Mr. Combs when the case actually goes to trial. And I doubt very seriously if the U.S. attorney would have named or kind of alluded to all these different people and not named them unless they intend to come forward with either a charge or those people are going to be witnesses.
Yeah, again, some of the indictment reads, between at least 2008 and the present, Combs abused, threatened, and coerced victims to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct. Combs' staff and business associates were involved in organizing and facilitating the extended sex performances, which Combs dubbed freak-offs. Combs used physical, emotional, and verbal abuse to ensure that victims participated in the freak-offs and to maintain control over them. These are some of the same allegations we saw in the R. Kelly case. R. Kelly was accused of threatening and coercing his victims and using intimidation and using his associates, his security. This is a common theme we're seeing now in several of these conspiracy racketeering cases. Mansfield, like R. Kelly, we didn't see any of his staff or anyone else indicted, but we did see witnesses in his case come forward and talk about what they did see. Sean Combs, again, his lawyers have said that all of this is consensual. A lot of folks have issues with understanding why, if this is consensual, as you called it, orgies, why are there charges? And what does consent mean in this context? I think people perhaps may have too narrow of a view or understanding in the criminal context of what consent means.
Well, consent is a simple concept. It really means that the two adults of equal bargaining position agree to share in the conduct of one activity. And in this far-reaching indictment, the government is going to really have to prove every single transaction involving kidnapping, arson, assault and battery, with actual dates and other witnesses that can corroborate some individual's account of what happened to him or her. This is a bundle of a large, difficult case. It's not the case that I thought I would be reading when they said he was indicted. I hate to say this again, Areva, but it's lacking standard pleading specifics, and we're used to seeing specific dates in other cases. It's lacking. When you say 2008 until the present time, that's very general. And I think that the government is seeking to frighten Mr. Combs into some sort of plea agreement because they are not revealing all of the evidence that they have in this indictment. This is a strategy that the government is using. I also think, I'm not defending his conduct, but as a criminal defense attorney, I do have some issues with the process that the government used in this case against Mr. Combs. But he is responsible for some nasty conduct, some immoral conduct, some criminal conduct, but the government hasn't specified with specificity, did Mr. Combs direct others to influence and coerce these women? Or did Mr. Combs, do they have evidence that Mr. Combs directly talked to each of these sex traffickers and
But I don't know
coerced
why you
each
keep
of them
saying that, man.
separately.
Listen to what I just read. It said between 2008 and the present, Combs abused, threatened, and coerced victims to fulfill his sexual desires. So they make a very clear statement about what he did. And then they
if
said
that's
he
in the
used...
RICO context, it doesn't mean that.
Go ahead.
If it's in the RICO context, it doesn't mean that it's a general statement, but it doesn't mean that specifically he did these things individually in and of himself every time that they say that in the pleading, because otherwise they wouldn't make references to all of his other staff and his other employees. His employees were doing, I'm sorry.
But that's not the standard, Bobby. The standard isn't that you have to lay out every incident when you have a racketeering and conspiracy charge. It's saying what he did, that he abused, threatened, and coerced victims, that his associates were involved in organizing and facilitating this conduct, and that he used physical, emotional, and verbal abuse. Now, I'm sure when we get down to, the exchange of discovery and they start, refining the motions, we'll get more details. But is that the standard for an indictment? Must they list every incident where he coerced, threatened, and abused a victim?
No, and in fact, they did get an indictment. So they followed the law with respect to what they had to do. Mansfield is correct that the government purposely did not give dates as to each. On the state side, we would do what was known as overt acts to Areva. And in each overt act, there would usually be a date that it happened. And it happened on this date, and Mr. Combs did this, and Mr. Combs did that. Everybody is absolutely correct. The government didn't do that. And I would argue they did that for a reason. But from a legal standpoint, they didn't have to, because this is an overarching racketeering RICO charge where they're saying that he used his legitimate business to sexually harass, injure, hurt these women over a period of time. So they only had to say, between 2009, 2008, and 2022, 2023, this is what he was doing. Mansfield is correct that the defense is going to try to argue that it is too broad, and that's why we have trials, and we'll see where it goes.
When we come forward, I want to talk about this bail strategy that his attorneys used. They had him fly to New York to be in the city 2 weeks or so, even before he was arrested. Obviously, they had been in contact with the U.S. attorney and knew that it was coming. What do you think of that as a strategy? And then what is likely to happen? There's an October 9th hearing date coming up. And we know the attorney for Sean Combs is going to be making another plea to the court to have him released on bail. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580, when we come forward.
You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
October 2nd is California Clean Air Day. It's your chance to ride Metro for free. You'll be helping make the air cleaner and our roads less crowded. Let's clear the air together and make Los Angeles healthier. Check out metro.net for more info. Mark your calendar for October 2nd. It's California Clean Air Day. When you go Metro, you'll enjoy free rides and help clear the air. We can reduce pollution and create a healthier environment together. Let's all ride for a cleaner tomorrow. Start your journey at metro.net.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 believes in community empowerment. LA's 99 neighborhood councils form the grassroots level of the Los Angeles city government. The system was created to connect LA's diverse communities to City Hall. While neighborhood council board members are volunteers, they are also public officials elected to office by the members of their community. Neighborhood councils advocate on issues like homelessness, housing, land use, emergency preparedness, public safety, parks, transportation, and sustainability. They also provide local expertise on the delivery of city services to their various communities. Neighborhood councils are open to participation by anyone who is a part of the fabric of daily life in said community. This includes those who live, work, or own property or a business. If you are interested in stepping up to join your local neighborhood council, visit www.empowerla.org. That's empowerla.org. It's time to think globally but act locally. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
The California Crusader newspaper would like to thank all of our subscribers for their support throughout the years, proudly serving the South Los Angeles and South Bay areas for more than 40 years. The California Crusader is a multicultural, Black-owned, adjudicated newspaper that focuses on providing newsworthy information to the people in our community. We're constantly looking for ways to assist businesses in our community to connect with our subscribers. We provide low-cost, effective ways to promote your business with our reasonable and affordable advertising rates. You can participate by suggesting, sharing, and submitting your stories on the California Crusader newspaper Community Share Facebook group page, or visit our website at cal-cruise-news.com. That's calcruisenews.com. Then click on the Submit Now button located on the top right corner of the homepage, or text CCN to 42828. Again, text CCN to 42828. The California Crusader newspaper, working together to build a better community for our future. Subscribe today.
All right, Mansfield. Sean Combs was in New York a couple of weeks before he actually had to turn himself in at that Manhattan courthouse. His lawyer apparently had him travel there in anticipation of him being arrested. They came to his hotel room last Monday night, arrested him. The indictment was unsealed Tuesday morning. What was the strategy behind having him in New York City a couple of weeks in advance? The lawyer seemed to suggest he was disappointed, too, that the indictment, that he was arrested, maybe suggesting they had been in conversations and he thought something was going to be worked out.
In the federal system and in the state system, any level of substantial cooperation by a defendant deserves and is usually rewarded with some sort of reciprocal exchange on the government side, on the prosecution side. So his defense attorney did tell him, it's better for you to turn yourself in. It's clear that we know that there is going to be an indictment and there is going to be an arrest warrant. So let's voluntarily turn ourselves in. He communicated that to the AUSA, and apparently he had an agreement just waiting to hear from the AUSA on how to arrange that self-surrender. But sometimes the government, and in this case, I think the government wanted to see a perp walk. They think they wanted to have some video that would make it to TMZ, showing him walking, doing the perp walk. And I think that's almost consistent with the way that they did the press conference and really using gratuitous evidence or so-called evidence in connection with the actual indictment to attack P. Diddy. I am not a fan of P. Diddy, but I do understand that there are some things that the government has done that is probably overreach. They should have set up a time for him to walk into the office and turn himself in. There's probably another reason now that there's this forfeiture allegation, because he also put his house up for sale prior to the indictment being unredacted. So he knew that there was going to probably be a forfeiture allegation, and he wanted to get ahead of that to again show that he's cooperating to minimize some of the impact of the government's forfeiture allegations and the government's establishing some sort of bail for him if he's seen as someone that cooperated. But the government threw cold water on that.
So talk about the forfeiture more, Bobby. I haven't heard a lot about that in the news. That could be huge because this is a multimillionaire with, he had sold off some of his businesses, like his interest in Revolt Television. After the civil lawsuits were filed last year, a lot of folks walked away from him, didn't want to be in business with him because of the taint. This is well before the criminal charges. So some of the businesses are probably already gone, but presumably he still has an interest in some businesses. What would the government have to prove in order to, as Mansfield said, basically put him out of business and seize the assets from his businesses?
They would have to prove to a judge that his businesses were actually a front for illegal activity. This is very more commonly used in drug cases, cartel cases, where individuals may be using seemingly legitimate businesses to as a front for drug activity, sometimes human trafficking. This is very unusual for a case like this for an individual like this who had a long-standing business that's very publicly known, um, and pretty much the public associates him with the recording industry. So it'll be very interesting to see if the government's going to be able to prove that his entire business was a criminal enterprise for the purposes of forfeiture.
Would that happen in a separate legal proceeding? Let's say he is on trial for the sex trafficking. If he's convicted on the sex trafficking, is there then a separate trial to determine if, his various businesses were fronts for sex trafficking?
Generally, I know on the state side, in order to do this, there would have to be a separate proceeding where the government would have to prove that his business was not a legitimate business when it's actually a criminal enterprise that was essentially a front for illegal activity. And I think what they're trying to argue, Areva, is that over the years, his business didn't cease to function as a regular business. As you know, he kind of slowly weaned his way away from doing the more recording, doing actual artists, and he was doing all these other, the liquor sponsorship, these other things. So it'll be interesting to see how the government approaches the argument that his entire enterprise was criminal.
Let's talk about the bail hearing, Mansfield. He's going to be back in court on October 9th. The lawyers are going to make another request to the judge that he be released on bail. For the charges against him and the allegations against him, was the decision right by the judge to deny him bail in the first instance?
I disagree with the judge's decision because of the bail package that was put together. They basically prevented Mr. Combs from engaging in the criminal conduct that the government believed he would engage in if he was released on bail. They had so many guardrails around him, his home, his mother's home, his passport, his children's passports, his children's assets, to the extent that he gave them any inheritance up front. I mean, they put a log, a video camera on his place, a GPS tracking device, an ankle monitor device. I'm sure a login sheet where he would give a login sheet of anybody that visited him. No women could visit him at his home unless they were related to him by blood or by marriage. The package that was put together, Areva, is unprecedented. I have never seen a bail package like that. Never. And he wasn't charged with murder. He is charged with serious crimes, but there is a presumption, and it's rebuttable. But when you put together a bail package like they put together, it almost immunized him and isolated him from engaging in tampering with witnesses. He wouldn't be able to do that.
But what do you make of that, Bobby? On one level, it's pretty offensive, and this is the two-tier justice system that we have, that somebody can be a multi-millionaire and say, let me sit at home in my $50 million mansion, and I'm going to have private security, I'm going to have guards, I'm going to have cameras, I'm going to have all of these precautions, so I get to do it at home, where the poor person has to go sit in a detention center. Is that really the system of justice that we want in this country?
You make an excellent point, Areva. There's been significant changes on both the state side and the federal side to make it easier for individuals who are indigent to be able to make bail or to have no bail. In this particular instance, the criminal reforms worked to the detriment of Mr. Diddy because it wasn't really about money. Although the judge did say that that they thought that he was going to be a flight risk, I don't think that, as Mansfield pointing out, that wasn't the case. What the judge was saying was that there was no independent means of determining that Diddy was not going to have an opportunity to influence witnesses with the kind of resources he had and the relationships he's had. There's no way that the government could have really, controlled who he was talking to on the phone.
You'd have to have monitors. We'd have to set up a whole separate system of court monitor his phone. Because if you're in jail, you talking on the phone and you're trying to cook up something criminal, they're monitoring your phone calls. But if you're at home with your own private security, Mansfield, you can be making sign language. You can be writing notes to I don't know, Mansfield. I hear you on one hand, but that doesn't seem like it's at all, one, fair to the person who doesn't have money, and two, it doesn't seem like it provides the level of isolation that being in jail provides. So I don't see how that would have prevented him from doing anything that he wanted to do in terms of contacting witnesses through people, passing notes, etc. There's no way that the system is set up to monitor someone in their private mansion in Florida.
So if someone has a lot of money, like on the scale of Mr. Combs, what difference would it make if he's inside, if he's incarcerated pending trial, as opposed to if he's outside? He would never risk calling somebody.
Oh, come on. Wait a minute, man.
Oh, no.
We're running out of time. I want to have you back. There are allegations that he contacted some of these witnesses 58 times after some of these lawsuits were filed. And presumably during the same time period that he knew he was under criminal investigation. So that's not a credible argument right there. We are out of time. I'm sorry. We have to have you guys back to continue this conversation because we got some Diddy sympathizers. I say that with a small.
No, that's not true.
I'll let you defend yourself on the next Diddy conference that we have. We got to go deeper on this issue because there are some procedural issues and some criminal justice issues that I care about as a civil rights lawyer, but I also care about these women who've been victimized. It's been going on too long. Next voice that you hear will be Robin Ayers in the Raw Report. Thank you, guys. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
People of color cannot find a suitable match through the Living Donor Registry. Another doctor who is leading the patient's care team said the outlook is encouraging. A second patient has since been treated with similar practice in Utah. Vice President Kamala Harris